Sophia Mitchell stood in front of the mirror, carefully adjusting the blue dress that clung softly to her figure. Ethan always said blue was his favorite color on her. She ran her hands over the fabric one more time, smoothing out invisible creases as if the perfection of her appearance could somehow reflect on the evening she had planned. The dining room was bathed in soft candlelight, the table set for two with their best china and the wine Ethan had been saving for a special occasion. Tonight was supposed to be that occasion. 12 years of marriage wasn't something to overlook, especially after the ups and downs that life had thrown at them. She had even arranged for Lily and Jack to stay at Rachel's house for the night, giving her and Ethan a rare evening alone. Sophia glanced at the clock, 6:45 p.m. Ethan would be home any minute. Her heart fluttered with the same nervous excitement she had felt on their first date. In recent months, things between them had felt distant, but tonight she hoped to change that. She hoped that with the right setting, the right atmosphere, they could find their way back to each other. She walked to the living room, pausing briefly to check her reflection again. The warm glow from the candles cast soft shadows along the walls, and for a fleeting moment, Sophia allowed herself to believe that everything would go perfectly. The soft hum of the garage door startled her out of her thoughts. Ethan was home. Sophia hurried to the door, smoothing her hair as she opened it. Ethan stepped inside, dressed sharply in his usual business attire, his dark hair slightly disheveled from the wind outside. He held a sleek black box in his hands, and Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "Happy anniversary," Ethan said, handing her the box. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, but Sophia ignored the nagging feeling in the pit of her stomach. She took the box from him gently, the weight of it feeling heavier than it should. "Thank you," she whispered, meeting his gaze. There was something unreadable in his expression, but she brushed it aside. Maybe he was just tired. Ethan walked past her into the dining room, glancing at the table but saying nothing. Sophia followed, carefully untying the silk ribbon that wrapped around the box. She lifted the lid, expecting to find something delicate inside, jewelry, perhaps. But what she found made her fingers tremble. A thick envelope lay inside, her name scrawled in Ethan's handwriting across the front. Sophia's pulse quickened as she pulled it out, and with a sense of dread unraveling inside her, she slid her finger beneath the seal. The contents spilled into her hands. Divorce papers. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The air in the room seemed to thin as she stared at the cold, legal language printed on the sheets. Her chest tightened, and she looked up at Ethan, searching his face for an explanation. "You're joking," she managed to say, the words barely audible. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing his arms as he watched her reaction. The silence that followed felt louder than any explosion. Hello guys. If you like our stories and haven't subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel to help US footsteps echoed from the front door. And before Sophia could process what was happening, Mark and Dave, Ethan's closest friends, strolled into the kitchen. Mark chuckled as he glanced at the box in her hands. "So she opened it already?" Mark smirked. "We told you she'd be speechless." Dave laughed, shaking his head. "Man, Ethan, you really went all out for this one. Anniversary and divorce in one night? That's bold." Sophia's grip tightened around the papers as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. They were mocking her. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The room spun slightly, the candles flickering in the periphery of her vision. The laughter around her grew distant, muffled by the pounding of her heart. She took a step back, nearly bumping into the table behind her. Ethan's eyes finally met hers, but there was no apology in them, no trace of regret, just indifference. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ethan shrugged. "It's been coming for a while, Sophia. I didn't want to drag it out." The coldness of his response sliced through her, and for a second, she thought she might collapse right there. But instead, she forced herself to straighten, clutching the papers to her chest. "I need to get out of here," she muttered, her voice cracking. Sophia barely remembered grabbing her coat. The next thing she knew, she was driving aimlessly through the dark streets, tears blurring the road ahead. Her car seemed to guide itself toward Rachel's house, and before long, she found herself parked in her sister's driveway. Rachel opened the door almost immediately, concern etching her features as she saw the state Sophia was in. Without a word, Sophia stepped inside and sank onto the couch, the papers still clutched in her hands. Rachel knelt beside her, gently prying the documents from her fingers. As her eyes scanned the contents, her mouth tightened in anger. "He gave you divorce papers on your anniversary?" Rachel's voice trembled with disbelief. "What kind of man does that?" Sophia shook her head, wiping at her tear-streaked cheeks. "I don't know. I thought we were okay. I thought tonight would bring us closer." Rachel sat beside her, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You don't deserve this, Sophia. Not like this." For a long time, neither of them spoke. Sophia's mind raced with memories of Ethan, the man she thought she knew, the father of her children. How had it come to this? Eventually, Rachel pulled away, brushing Sophia's hair from her face. "Listen to me. You're not going to let him get away with this. You hear me?" Sophia met her sister's gaze, something shifting deep inside her. The tears hadn't stopped, but the weight in her chest felt different now, less like sadness and more like a slow, burning anger. "I want to fight," Sophia said softly, her voice growing steadier with each word. "I'm not going to let him humiliate me like this." Rachel's eyes lit up with fierce determination. "Good. Then let's start by finding the best lawyer in town." And just like that, the night that began with heartbreak shifted into something else entirely. The sun filtered weakly through the curtains of Rachel's living room the next morning, casting soft shadows over Sophia, who hadn't moved from the couch. Her eyes felt dry, as if she'd run out of tears during the night. The divorce papers lay crumpled on the coffee table, where Rachel had tossed them after reading every line. Sophia shifted, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The house was quiet except for the faint clatter of Rachel making coffee in the kitchen. "You didn't sleep," Rachel said gently as she approached, setting a mug in front of her sister. Sophia shook her head. "How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face." She traced the edge of the mug absent-mindedly. "The way he looked at me, like I was a stranger." Rachel sat down beside her, crossing her legs beneath her. "Soph, I've been thinking. Ethan didn't just wake up yesterday and decide he wanted a divorce. He planned this." Sophia glanced sideways. "I know, but I don't understand why now. Why humiliate me like that?" Rachel hesitated, carefully choosing her next words. "Maybe it wasn't about you. Maybe it was about him. Guys like Ethan, they need control. This wasn't just about ending things. He wanted to make sure you felt small when he did it." Sophia swallowed, her hands curling into fists in her lap. "Well, it worked." Rachel's hand rested over hers. "Only if you let it." Silence hung between them until Rachel shifted forward. "I have a contact, a lawyer, Olivia Carter. She's known for handling complicated divorces. I think you should meet with her." Sophia exhaled slowly. "A lawyer feels so final." "It is final," Rachel replied softly. "But at least this way you'll be the one with the upper hand." The idea simmered in Sophia's mind. She thought about Ethan's indifference, the laughter of Mark and Dave echoing in her ears. The humiliation burned brighter than the sadness. "Fine," she said at last, her voice firmer than she expected. "Call her." 3 days later, Sophia sat across from Olivia Carter in a sleek downtown office. The woman exuded confidence, her tailored suit and sharp eyes suggesting she was not someone easily intimidated. Olivia listened carefully as Sophia recounted the events of that night, nodding occasionally but remaining expressionless. When Sophia finished, Olivia leaned back in her chair. "I've seen cases like this before," she said calmly. "But the public humiliation, that adds a unique layer." Sophia fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. "I don't want to drag this out more than necessary. I want justice. And I want to know why." Olivia studied her for a long moment. "Sophia, are you sure you want to know the truth? Because if we dig, we're going to find things. And some of them might hurt more than the divorce itself." Sophia's jaw tightened. I need to know. A faint smile tugged at Olivia's lips. Then let's get started. Over the next week, Sophia began to see Ethan's life through a different lens. Olivia's team uncovered bank statements Sophia had never seen before, large withdrawals tied to properties she didn't know existed. One apartment in particular stood out, a downtown loft, registered under Ethan's name but hidden under a company shell. Sophia sat in Olivia's office again, staring at the documents spread out before her. This apartment, Sophia said, tapping the paper with her finger. Who lives there? Olivia arched a brow. Would you like us to find out? Sophia hesitated but nodded. 2 days later, Sophia's phone buzzed late at night. A message from Olivia appeared. We have surveillance photos. I think you'll want to see them in person. Sophia drove to Olivia's office the next morning with Rachel by her side. The photos lay in a neat folder on Olivia's desk. As Sophia flipped through them, her breath caught. Ethan wasn't alone in that apartment. A woman appeared beside him in several images, younger, effortlessly beautiful, and clearly comfortable in the space. Sophia's grip on the folder tightened. Who is she? Olivia sighed. Her name is Andrea. She works at Ethan's firm. From what we gathered, they've been seeing each other for over a year. Rachel's mouth fell open. A year? While he was still, yes, Olivia confirmed. This wasn't sudden, Sophia. He's been planning this for a long time. Sophia's pulse roared in her ears, drowning out the conversation that followed. He was never going to tell me, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Rachel reached for her hand, but Sophia pulled away, standing abruptly. I need air, she muttered, stepping out into the hallway. Her thoughts spiraled as she paced the corridor, each step echoing in the empty space. The betrayal cut deeper than she had imagined. Not just the affair, but the fact that Ethan had orchestrated it so carefully, dismantling their life piece by piece behind her back. When Rachel finally joined her, Sophia spoke before her sister could. I want him to feel this, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. The way I feel it now. Rachel studied her carefully. What are you thinking? Sophia's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. I'm thinking I want to return the favor. That evening, Sophia sat alone in her living room, staring at the empty dinner table she had so carefully set just days before. She reached for her phone and scrolled through the contacts until she found Ethan's name. Her thumb hovered over the call button but stopped. No, not yet. Instead, she opened a new message and typed carefully. I have something for you. I'll drop it off tomorrow. She attached a single photo Olivia's team had taken of Ethan and Andrea together. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed send. The following afternoon, Sophia parked outside Ethan's office, her heart drumming steadily in her chest. The small black box sat in the passenger seat, tied with the same delicate silk ribbon Ethan had used on their anniversary night. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up, feeling the smooth edges beneath her fingertips. Rachel's voice echoed in her mind from earlier that morning. You don't have to do this in person, sophomore. Just have it delivered. But Sophia knew that wasn't enough. This wasn't about efficiency or convenience. She needed to see his reaction, to watch as the ground shifted beneath him the way it had for her. Ethan's secretary greeted her with a polite smile, clearly surprised to see Sophia after months of absence. Hi, Mrs. Mitchell. Is Ethan expecting you? Sophia returned the smile, though it barely reached her eyes. No, but I won't take much of his time. It's personal. A brief hesitation flickered across the woman's face before she nodded and gestured toward his office. Go ahead. He just finished a meeting. Sophia's heels clicked softly against the polished floor as she crossed the hall. The door to Ethan's office was slightly ajar, and she paused for a heartbeat before pushing it open. Ethan looked up from his desk, clearly surprised to see her. His gaze dropped to the box in her hands, his brow furrowing slightly. Sophia, he said carefully, leaning back in his chair. I wasn't expecting you. I know, she replied calmly, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. But I thought this was best delivered in person. Ethan's eyes narrowed with suspicion as she approached his desk and placed the box in front of him. He didn't reach for it immediately. "What is this?" he asked, the slightest edge of caution creeping into his voice. Sophia met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "A gift. Open it." For a long moment, Ethan simply stared at the box, as if trying to decipher some hidden meaning in its elegant appearance. Finally, he untied the ribbon, lifting the lid with the same casual air he had when handing her the divorce papers. But the moment his eyes fell on the contents, the mask slipped. The photos lay neatly inside Ethan and Andrea, caught in moments of intimacy at the loft. Each image had been carefully selected, leaving no room for misinterpretation. A copy of the financial records sat beneath them, documenting the secret account and apartment. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fingers curling around the edges of the box. "Sophia," he began, but she cut him off with a raised hand. "No," she said quietly. "You don't get to explain this away. I gave you 12 years of my life. I stood by you, raised our children, and loved you even when things felt distant. And this is how you chose to repay that." Ethan's mouth opened, but no words came. His hand hovered over the photos as if unsure whether to remove them from the box or push them aside entirely. Sophia watched the flicker of panic flash across his face, subtle but unmistakable. "You hired someone to follow me?" he asked finally, his voice tight. Sophia crossed her arms, leaning against the edge of his desk. "I didn't need to. You were careless. Or maybe you thought I wouldn't bother looking." She tilted her head slightly. "You underestimated me, Ethan." He exhaled sharply, closing the lid of the box as if that could somehow undo the reality staring back at him. "This isn't necessary," he muttered, his gaze dropping to the papers beneath the photographs. The divorce was already in motion. Sophia's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly the point. You could have ended this with decency, but instead you turned it into a joke. A spectacle." Her voice didn't rise, but the calmness carried a weight that made Ethan shift uncomfortably in his chair. "I thought I was making it easier," he replied, though even he didn't seem convinced by his own excuse. Sophia laughed softly, a sound devoid of humor. "Easier for who? You? Mark and Dave?" Her eyes darkened. "Do you know what I remember most about that night? It's not even the papers. It's the way you let them laugh at me, like I was nothing." Ethan looked away, jaw tight. He had no defense for that. "I never wanted to humiliate you," he muttered. But Sophia cut him off with a sharp glance. "Don't lie to me, Ethan. Not now." She stepped closer, placing her palms flat against his desk as she leaned in. "Here's the truth. I don't care why you did it. I'm not here to beg for explanations or try to understand. I just wanted you to feel it, for one brief second, the way I did." Ethan's hand twitched, but he kept it still, his eyes fixed on hers. "Is that why you came?" he asked after a long pause. "To get even?" Sophia straightened, brushing invisible dust from her dress. "No, I came because I'm done letting you have control over this. You don't get to walk away with the satisfaction of being the one who ended things on your terms." Ethan's brow furrowed, and for a moment, there was a flicker of the man she used to know, the one who, long ago, would have fought to fix whatever was broken between them. But that man was gone, replaced by the stranger sitting in front of her now. "I'll sign whatever you need," Sophia continued, turning toward the door. "But don't expect me to disappear quietly. You might have planned for this divorce, but you weren't prepared for me to fight back." She paused with her hand on the doorknob, glancing over her shoulder. "Oh, and Ethan? You should probably let Andrea know that her photos ended up in the wrong hands. Wouldn't want her to feel humiliated, would we?" His face paled slightly, but Sophia didn't wait for a response. The soft click of the door echoed behind her as she walked down the hallway, her heels striking the polished floor with steady, deliberate steps. Rachel was waiting in Sophia's living room later that evening, curled up on the couch with a glass of wine in hand. When Sophia stepped through the door, Rachel's eyes flicked to the empty box tucked under her arm. "Well?" Rachel asked, sitting up expectantly. Sophia set the box on the table and collapsed beside her sister. "I think I caught him off guard." Rachel grinned. I bet you did. How did he react? Sophia leaned her head back against the cushion, exhaling slowly. He tried to justify it, act like it wasn't personal, but it was written all over his face. He knows this isn't over. Rachel raised her glass in silent approval. Good. He deserves worse. For the first time in days, Sophia allowed herself to smile, small and fleeting, but genuine. Maybe, but I'm not wasting any more energy hating him. I just want it done. Rachel studied her for a moment, the warmth in her gaze softening. I'm proud of you, you know? A lot of people wouldn't have had the strength to face him like that. Sophia's smile lingered. I didn't think I had it in me either. But I think I'm done being the person Ethan thought he could walk over. Rachel clinked her glass lightly against Sophia's. To new beginnings, then. They sipped in silence, the weight of the evening settling between them in a way that felt less heavy than before. A week later, Sophia sat in Olivia Carter's office once again, this time with a clearer mind and steadier hands. I've drafted the initial terms, Olivia said, sliding a folder across the desk. We're pushing for full custody of Lily and Jack, with no contest. Ethan's financial discrepancies will work in your favor. Sophia nodded, flipping through the documents. I don't want him near the kids. Not after everything. And he won't be, Olivia assured her. He's already losing ground. The photos alone are enough to sway the court in your favor. Sophia's gaze hardened. I don't want him to lose custody because of the affair. I want him to lose because he wasn't there for them. Not really. He left long before he handed me those papers. Olivia smiled faintly. And that's exactly how we'll present it. Sophia closed the folder, feeling the weight of the past weeks start to lift, little by little. Ethan might have shattered their marriage, but he hadn't broken her. And as she stepped out of Olivia's office and into the sunlight, she realized she was already standing taller than she had in years. The days that followed Sophia's confrontation with Ethan passed in a strange blur of calm and quiet determination. It wasn't the kind of peace that came from resolution. It was more like the eye of a storm, still and silent, but with the weight of something looming just over the horizon. Sophia embraced it, though. She welcomed the stillness after months of tension twisting inside her. She spent more time with Lily and Jack, pouring her energy into simple routines, school pickups, bedtime stories, and lazy Sundays in the park. They were too young to understand the full weight of what was happening, and Sophia intended to keep it that way for as long as she could. One evening, as she tucked Jack into bed, he looked up at her with wide, sleepy eyes. Is Dad coming home tomorrow? He asked softly, clutching his worn-out teddy bear to his chest. Sophia's heart clenched, but she forced a soft smile. Not tomorrow, sweetheart. But he loves you very much. Jack frowned slightly, his small face pinched with thought. But he doesn't live here anymore. Sophia smoothed his hair gently. No, he doesn't. But that doesn't mean he won't see you. Things are just different now. Jack accepted her answer with the quiet understanding that only children seem to have, nodding sleepily as his eyes fluttered shut. But as Sophia turned off the light and stepped out of the room, she felt the weight of his words settle heavily on her shoulders. He doesn't live here anymore. It was such a simple truth, but it hit harder than she expected. Ethan's absence echoed through the house in a way that was impossible to ignore. His side of the closet stood half empty. His cologne no longer lingered in the bathroom after his morning routine. Even the sound of his footsteps in the hallway had been replaced by silence. For the first time in 12 years, Sophia was learning how to live without him. A few days later, Rachel stopped by unannounced, armed with 2 bottles of wine and an undeniable sense of purpose. You've been quiet, Rachel said, settling into Sophia's couch and pouring them both generous glasses. Too quiet, Sophia shrugged, curling up beside her. I've just been trying to focus on the kids. They need stability right now. Rachel arched a brow. And what about you? What do you need? Sophia hesitated, staring down at her glass. I don't know. I thought confronting Ethan would give me some kind of closure, but it didn't. I'm still angry, and I hate that I feel this way. Rachel sipped her wine thoughtfully. Maybe that's the point. Maybe you're supposed to feel it. Anger isn't always a bad thing, sophomore. Sometimes it's what pushes us forward. Sophia met her sister's gaze, searching for something she couldn't quite name. Forward to what? Rachel's eyes softened. To whatever comes next. Sophia wanted to believe her, but the path ahead still felt uncertain. That uncertainty, however, began to unravel when Olivia called 2 days later with an update. "You're not going to believe this," Olivia said, her voice crackling through the phone. "Ethan just filed a motion to request shared custody of Lily and Jack." Sophia nearly dropped the mug she was holding. "What? After everything he's done?" "I know," Olivia said with a sigh. "It's a bold move, especially considering the evidence we have against him. But Ethan's lawyer is pushing the angle that his infidelity has nothing to do with his ability to be a good father." Sophia's grip tightened around her phone. "He doesn't get to pick and choose when he wants to be a father, Olivia. He barely spent time with them when we were together." "I agree. But the court might see it differently if he plays the part well enough." Olivia hesitated. "I think we need to dig deeper. If Ethan's willing to fight for custody, there's a reason. And I don't think it's because he suddenly wants to be a hands-on dad." Sophia's stomach twisted with unease. "Then let's find out what he's hiding." The following week, Olivia's team uncovered something that made Sophia's blood run cold. Ethan's financial records revealed a series of large transactions that had nothing to do with Andrea or the downtown loft. Instead, they traced back to offshore accounts and investments hidden beneath the same shell company Ethan had used to conceal his apartment. Sophia sat in Olivia's office, staring at the evidence in disbelief. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Olivia leaned forward, hands clasped together on the desk. "It's money laundering, Sophia. Ethan's been using his firm to funnel illegal funds. That's why he's fighting for custody. If he loses, and the truth comes out, he risks not only his reputation but his freedom." Sophia's heart pounded. "How long has this been going on?" "Years," Olivia replied grimly. "But it escalated in the last 18 months. Right around the time he started pulling away from you." Sophia's mind raced. Pieces of the puzzle she hadn't even realized were missing began to fall into place. The sudden distance, the secret accounts, the need to finalize the divorce quickly. Ethan wasn't just leaving her. He was trying to sever ties before everything fell apart. "What do we do now?" Sophia asked, feeling the weight of the revelation pressing down on her. Olivia's gaze was unwavering. "We use it. Ethan's entire case for shared custody depends on him maintaining the image of a responsible father. If we expose this, the court won't just deny him custody. They'll question whether he should have any visitation rights at all." Sophia's hands trembled slightly as she absorbed the full scope of Ethan's betrayal. He hadn't just broken their marriage, he had put their children's future at risk. "I want to move forward with it," she said firmly. "I won't let him get away with this." Olivia nodded, her expression resolute. "Then let's make sure he doesn't." The day of the custody hearing arrived faster than Sophia anticipated. As she sat in the courtroom, her heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her gaze steady. Ethan sat across from her, his lawyer whispering in his ear, but Sophia could see the tension etched into his features. He knew what was coming. When Olivia presented the evidence, Ethan's face drained of color. The courtroom fell silent as the judge reviewed the documents, his expression hardening with each passing second. By the time the hearing ended, there was no question about the outcome. Sophia walked out of the courthouse that afternoon with full custody of Lily and Jack, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, for the first time in a long time, she had taken control of her own story. Sophia sat alone in her car outside the courthouse, gripping the steering wheel as the events of the day replayed in her mind. The judge's ruling had been swift and decisive, granting her full custody of Lily and Jack while Ethan was left to grapple with the consequences of his actions. But even as the weight of victory settled over her, Sophia couldn't shake the lingering sense of unease. It wasn't just about custody. The truth about Ethan's financial dealings loomed like a dark cloud, and she knew it was far from over. This wasn't just a divorce. It was the unraveling of a life she had spent over a decade building. And now she had to face what came next. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat, pulling her from her thoughts. Rachel's name flashed across the screen. "You did it," Rachel said the moment Sophia answered. Her voice was bright, triumphant. "I knew you would." Sophia leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes for a brief moment. "I know. It still doesn't feel real, though." Rachel's tone softened. "It will. You just need time to process everything." Sophia hesitated, staring out at the courthouse steps where Ethan had disappeared minutes earlier. "I don't think he's going to let this go, Rachel. Ethan doesn't like losing. And this was public." Rachel sighed heavily on the other end. "You're probably right, but you're stronger than him now. He underestimated you once. He won't make that mistake again." Sophia wanted to believe that, but the uncertainty lingered. "I'll be home soon," she said, ending the call. By the time Sophia pulled into her driveway, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the front yard. She stepped inside, greeted by the warm hum of laughter as Lily and Jack played in the living room. Jack looked up first, his face lighting up the moment he saw her. "Mom!" He ran toward her, wrapping his small arms around her waist. Sophia crouched down, hugging him tightly. "Hey, buddy, were you good for Aunt Rachel?" Lily, ever the observant one, lingered behind Jack, watching Sophia carefully. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Sophia smiled softly, brushing a lock of hair behind Lily's ear. "It went well. You're staying with me from now on." Lily's eyes brightened, but Sophia caught the flicker of doubt that passed over her face. "What about Dad?" Lily asked hesitantly. Sophia's heart ached, but she kept her tone even. "Your dad will still see you, but things are going to be a little different." Lily nodded slowly, accepting the answer for now. Rachel appeared in the doorway, watching the exchange with a knowing look. "I'll leave you to it," she said, grabbing her coat. "Call me if you need anything." As Rachel slipped out, Sophia guided the kids to the kitchen, determined to hold onto the fragile sense of normalcy that had begun to settle over their home. But even as she cooked dinner and listened to their stories about school, her mind kept drifting back to Ethan and the inevitable fallout that was bound to come. The fallout arrived 3 days later. Sophia was at work when Olivia's number flashed across her phone. She answered immediately, sensing the urgency on the other end. "We have a problem," Olivia said without preamble. Sophia's stomach tightened. "What happened?" "Ethan's lawyer filed a motion to appeal the custody ruling. They're claiming you manipulated the court by exposing Ethan's financial records during the hearing." Sophia felt the air leave her lungs. "That was evidence. It wasn't manipulation." "I know," Olivia replied, her voice calm but firm. "But they're painting you as vindictive. They're arguing that the custody battle became personal, that you're using the children to punish Ethan for the affair." Sophia gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles turning white. "That's ridiculous. Ethan hasn't been present for months. The affair was just part of it." "I agree, but the court doesn't know Ethan the way we do," Olivia warned. "We need to be careful. His lawyer is aggressive, and they're going to try to turn this around." Sophia sank into her chair, pressing her fingertips to her temples. She had known Ethan wouldn't accept defeat easily, but she hadn't expected him to retaliate this quickly. "What do we do?" she asked finally. Olivia's voice softened slightly. "We stay ahead of them. I'm already drafting a response. But I need you to stay calm. This isn't over, but we're not going to let him win." Sophia nodded, even though Olivia couldn't see her. "I trust you." As she hung up, Sophia's gaze drifted to the framed photo of Lily and Jack on her desk. Their smiling faces stared back at her, innocent and unaware of the battle raging behind the scenes. She couldn't let Ethan take them, not after everything. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of legal meetings and court filings. Sophia juggled work, parenting, and the mounting stress of the custody appeal, barely finding time to breathe. But through it all, she refused to break. Every time doubt crept in, she remembered Ethan's smirk as he handed her the divorce papers, the laughter of Mark and Dave echoing in her ears. She remembered the humiliation, the betrayal, and the quiet resolve that had begun to burn beneath the surface. Ethan had underestimated her once. He wouldn't do it again. The final custody hearing arrived on a cold, gray morning. Sophia sat in the courtroom, Olivia beside her, as Ethan and his lawyer entered. His eyes met hers briefly, but Sophia held his gaze without flinching. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. The proceedings began, and Ethan's lawyer wasted no time painting Sophia as a vengeful ex-wife. He spoke of the photos, the black box, the way she had exposed Ethan's affair in front of his peers. But Olivia was ready. When it was her turn to speak, she calmly dismantled their argument piece by piece, presenting evidence of Ethan's neglect long before the affair began. She spoke of missed recitals, forgotten birthdays, and the countless nights Sophia had spent alone with the children while Ethan worked late. By the time the hearing ended, Ethan's lawyer looked visibly deflated. The judge's ruling came later that afternoon. Sophia sat in her car, staring at the document in her hands, the final confirmation that Ethan's appeal had been denied. Full custody remained with her, and Ethan's visitation rights were reduced to supervised weekends. As she drove home, a strange sense of lightness filled her chest. The storm was over. For the first time in months, Sophia felt like she could finally breathe. Sophia stood at the window of her bedroom, gazing out at the backyard where Lily and Jack played beneath the fading afternoon sun. Their laughter drifted through the open window, light and carefree, a stark contrast to the turmoil that had consumed her life in recent months. The custody battle was over, but the echoes of Ethan's betrayal lingered like shadows in the corners of her mind. She had won, yet victory felt strangely hollow. Ethan's absence in their lives, though necessary, left questions she wasn't sure how to answer. How much should she tell Lily and Jack? How could she explain why their father had chosen to walk away from their family, entangled in secrets and lies he could no longer conceal? Rachel's voice snapped Sophia from her thoughts. "You're overthinking again." Sophia turned to find her sister leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with that knowing look she always wore when Sophia's mind wandered too far. "I can't help it," Sophia admitted, rubbing the back of her neck. "I feel like I should be relieved, but I just keep wondering when the next shoe is going to drop." Rachel stepped into the room, settling on the edge of the bed. "That's because you spent years waiting for things to go wrong. It's a hard habit to break." Sophia sighed, sinking into the armchair by the window. "It's more than that. Ethan hasn't tried to contact the kids since the hearing. Not once. It's been weeks." Rachel shrugged. "Maybe that's a blessing." "Maybe," Sophia said quietly, though the ache in her chest told her otherwise. Rachel leaned forward, her elbows resting on her knees. "Listen, I know this isn't easy, but you can't control what Ethan does or doesn't do. You did everything you could to protect Lily and Jack. Now it's up to him to decide if he wants to be part of their lives." Sophia nodded, knowing Rachel was right. Still, the silence from Ethan felt louder than any confrontation. Later that evening, as Sophia tucked Lily into bed, her daughter's small voice broke the quiet. "Mom." Lily's eyes searched Sophia's face in the soft glow of the nightlight. "Yeah, sweetie? Did Dad stop loving us?" Sophia's heart squeezed painfully. She brushed a hand through Lily's hair, choosing her words carefully. "No, Lily. Your dad loves you and Jack very much. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, and they need time to figure things out." Lily frowned, her little brow furrowed with doubt. "Then why doesn't he call?" Sophia paused, feeling the weight of the question settle heavily between them. "I don't know," she admitted softly, "but that doesn't mean he doesn't care. And no matter what, I'm here for you. Always." Lily seemed to accept the answer, though Sophia could see the uncertainty lingering in her daughter's eyes. As Sophia kissed her forehead and quietly left the room, she felt the ache return, a quiet, relentless reminder of the broken pieces Ethan had left behind. A week later, Sophia's phone rang unexpectedly while she was folding laundry. When she saw Ethan's name flash across the screen, her stomach twisted with unease. She hesitated for a long moment before answering. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end, as if Ethan hadn't expected her to pick up. "Hey," he said at last, his voice low and uncertain. I wanted to check in, see how the kids are doing. Sophia's grip tightened around the phone. They're fine. They ask about you. Ethan exhaled softly. I know. I should have called sooner. I just didn't know what to say. Sophia bit back the sharp retort that rose to her lips. You don't need the perfect words, Ethan. You just need to show up. I want to, he said quickly. I was thinking, maybe I could see them this weekend, just for a few hours. Sophia hesitated. The idea of Ethan reappearing, even briefly, stirred conflicting emotions. But she knew denying him wouldn't serve Lily and Jack in the long run. I'll talk to them, she said finally. If they want to see you, we can arrange something. Ethan's relief was audible. Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate it. She ended the call, feeling drained. Trusting Ethan, even with supervised visits, felt like stepping onto unstable ground. Saturday arrived with nervous anticipation. Lily and Jack sat by the window, eagerly watching for Ethan's car. Sophia kept herself busy in the kitchen, pretending not to feel the knot tightening in her stomach. When Ethan's car finally pulled into the driveway, Jack bolted for the door, with Lily close behind. Sophia followed, opening the door just as Ethan stepped out. He looked different, tired, thinner than she remembered. There was an awkwardness in his stance, as if he wasn't sure how to approach his own children. Dad! Jack ran forward, wrapping his arms around Ethan's waist. Ethan crouched down, hugging him tightly. Hey, buddy. I missed you. Lily stood back, watching carefully. Ethan's eyes met hers, and after a moment, she stepped forward, letting him embrace her too. Sophia stayed near the door, observing the reunion with a guarded heart. This was for them, not for her. Ethan glanced up, catching her eye. Thank you, he mouthed silently. Sophia only nodded. The visit was short, but for Lily and Jack, it seemed to fill a gap that had been widening for weeks. As Ethan left, he promised to return the following weekend, and this time Sophia believed he might. That evening, as Sophia watched Lily and Jack play in the living room, she realized that something had shifted. The weight she'd been carrying felt lighter, the shadows less intrusive. She wasn't naive. She knew Ethan's path to redemption would be long and uncertain. But for the first time, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward. Not as husband and wife, that chapter was closed. But as parents, navigating the fragile space between love and forgiveness for the sake of the two people who mattered most. Sophia sat back, sipping her tea as the laughter of her children filled the room. And for the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. The following Saturday morning arrived with crisp autumn air drifting through the open windows. Sophia stood at the kitchen counter, watching the golden leaves flutter across the backyard as she poured coffee into her favorite mug. The house was quiet. Lily and Jack were still asleep, wrapped in the rare luxury of sleeping in. She relished the silence, letting it settle around her like a warm blanket. It was a fragile peace, one she knew could easily be disrupted by the sound of Ethan's car pulling into the driveway. His promise to return this weekend echoed in her mind, but part of her doubted he'd follow through. Ethan had a long history of letting people down, even those he claimed to love most. Sophia sipped her coffee, staring out the window with distant eyes, when the soft patter of footsteps behind her drew her attention. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Morning, sweetheart, Sophia said gently. Hungry? Lily shook her head, stepping closer. Is Dad coming today? Sophia placed her mug down carefully. He said he would. We'll see if he keeps his word. Lily's small shoulders lifted in a shrug, but Sophia could see the flicker of hope lingering beneath the surface. I hope he does, Lily said softly. Jack was really happy last time. Sophia smiled faintly. So were you. Lily didn't deny it. She simply climbed onto one of the kitchen stools, swinging her legs as Sophia began preparing breakfast. As the smell of pancakes filled the air, Jack soon wandered in, his hair sticking up in every direction. Mom, can we go to the park later? He asked between yawns. Sophia glanced at the clock. Ethan hadn't specified a time, which left the day hanging in limbo. Let's wait and see what happens. Okay, she replied carefully. Jack nodded, seemingly unbothered. But Sophia noticed the way Lily's gaze drifted toward the window every few minutes. By noon, there was still no sign of Ethan. Sophia tried to hide her disappointment, keeping Lily and Jack distracted with games and cartoons. She told herself it was better this way, less confusion, fewer empty promises. But deep down, she felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest. Just as she was about to suggest a trip to the park, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway caught everyone's attention. Jack bolted for the window, his excitement spilling over. "It's Dad." Sophia exchanged a glance with Lily, whose expression was more reserved but no less hopeful. Ethan stepped out of the car, carrying a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. He approached the front door with cautious steps, as if unsure of his welcome. Sophia opened the door before he could knock. "You're late," she said, crossing her arms. Ethan's eyes flickered with something between guilt and apology. "I know. I got caught up with work." Sophia sighed, stepping aside to let him in. Jack rushed forward immediately, hugging his father tightly. "I brought something for you guys," Ethan said, holding out the box. Jack grabbed it eagerly, but Sophia noticed Lily's hesitation. She lingered near the stairs, watching with careful eyes. Ethan crouched down, meeting Lily's gaze. "Hey, Lil. I missed you." Lily shifted slightly, then stepped forward, letting him hug her. It wasn't the same effortless affection she once gave, but it was a start. Sophia leaned against the doorway, arms still crossed as she observed the interaction. There was a strange distance between Ethan and his children, as if they were trying to remember how to exist in the same space. When Ethan stood, his eyes met Sophia's briefly. "Can we talk?" She hesitated but nodded, leading him to the kitchen while Lily and Jack opened the box in the living room. Ethan's gaze swept over the room, the clean counters, the soft glow of candles on the windowsill. It was the same house, but something felt different. "I'm trying," he said quietly, leaning against the counter. "I know I messed up, but I want to be better for them." Sophia studied him for a long moment. "I want to believe that, Ethan. But wanting to be better and actually being better aren't the same thing." He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I know. I'm not asking you to forget everything I did. I don't want to lose them completely." Sophia's expression softened, though she kept her guard up. "You won't, but they need consistency. You can't just show up when it's convenient for you." Ethan's gaze dropped to the floor. "I'm working on that. Promise." She wanted to believe him, for Lily and Jack's sake. But trust was a fragile thing, and Ethan had shattered it too many times for her to rebuild it overnight. "We'll see," she said finally, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. Ethan accepted the answer with a small nod, as if he understood there was no shortcut to fixing the damage he had caused. When they returned to the living room, Lily and Jack were surrounded by colored markers and sketchbooks from Ethan's box. Jack held up a drawing proudly, grinning. "Look, Dad, I made this for you." Ethan smiled genuinely, kneeling beside him. "I love it, buddy." Sophia watched from the doorway, the smallest flicker of hope stirring in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, whether Ethan's promises would hold or fall apart again. But for now, this moment belonged to Lily and Jack. And that was enough. The days that followed Ethan's visit passed quietly, almost as if the world had settled into a rhythm Sophia hadn't realized she missed. There was no grand reconciliation, no sudden shift that mended everything broken between them. But there was peace, fragile, delicate, but present. Ethan's visits became more consistent, and though Sophia kept her guard up, she couldn't ignore the way Lily and Jack brightened each time he arrived. One Saturday morning, Sophia found herself standing by the kitchen sink, watching through the window as Ethan helped Jack ride his bike down the driveway. Jack's laughter rang out as Ethan steadied him, letting go for brief moments before catching him again. Lily sat on the grass nearby, drawing in her sketchbook, occasionally glancing up at them. Rachel's voice drifted in from behind. "It's strange, isn't it?" Sophia turned, surprised to find her sister leaning casually against the doorway. "What is?" Rachel nodded toward the window. Seeing him here, after everything, Sophia's gaze returned to the scene outside. Yeah, it is. Rachel stepped closer, lowering her voice. Do you think he's really changed? Sophia hesitated, gripping the edge of the sink. I don't know. I think he's trying. But I'm not sure if that's enough. Rachel studied her carefully. And what about you? Are you okay with him being around more? Sophia exhaled slowly. It's not about me, Rachel. It's about the kids. They deserve to have him in their lives if he's willing to show up. Rachel frowned but didn't argue. I just don't want you to get hurt again. Sophia smiled faintly. I won't. I know where I stand now. Rachel wrapped an arm around her shoulders, giving her a light squeeze. Good, because I like this version of you. The one that doesn't take any of his crap. Sophia chuckled softly. Me too. Later that afternoon, Ethan lingered by the front door as Lily and Jack ran upstairs to put away their things. Sophia crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. You stayed longer than usual today. Ethan smiled faintly. They didn't want me to leave. She nodded, glancing toward the staircase where the sound of Jack's footsteps echoed faintly. They're happy when you're here. Ethan's expression softened. I know. I missed them more than I realized. Sophia studied him for a moment, searching for signs of the man who had once been a stranger to their family. There was still distance between them, but it no longer felt insurmountable. I guess I'll see you next weekend, Ethan said, reaching for the doorknob. Sophia hesitated. Ethan, he paused, turning back to her. I meant what I said before. They need consistency. Don't disappear on them again. His gaze met hers, steady and sincere. I won't. As the door closed behind him, Sophia felt the weight of his words linger in the quiet space he left behind. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to believe he might actually keep them. The following week unfolded with the quiet ease Sophia hadn't felt in years. The tension that once gripped the house seemed to dissolve little by little, replaced by the soft hum of everyday life. There were still moments of doubt late at night, when the house was silent, and the weight of the past crept into the corners of her mind. But each morning, as she watched Lily and Jack laugh over breakfast, the doubts faded just a little more. Ethan's next visit came without delay. He arrived right on time Saturday afternoon, carrying a soccer ball for Jack and sketching pencils for Lily. Jack practically dragged him to the backyard, while Lily sat on the porch steps, quietly observing as Ethan played with her brother. Sophia stood by the doorway, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold. He's really trying, isn't he? Lily's voice drifted up from the steps. Sophia glanced down at her daughter, surprised by the maturity in her tone. Yeah, Sophia admitted softly. It seems like he is. Lily tapped her pencil against her sketchbook, thinking for a long moment. Do you still hate him? Sophia's breath caught for a second, but she forced a smile. I don't hate him, Lil. I was hurt, but hate doesn't help anyone. Lily looked up at her, eyes searching. Are you ever going to forgive him? Sophia crouched down beside her daughter, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. Forgiveness isn't always easy, but I'm trying, just like he is. Lily seemed satisfied with that answer, turning her attention back to her drawing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan gathered his things and stood by the front door, Jack hugging him tightly before racing back upstairs to play. Lily gave him a more reserved hug but lingered just a little longer in his embrace. Sophia watched quietly from the kitchen. I'll see you next weekend, Ethan said, stepping outside. Sophia followed him onto the porch, pulling her sweater tighter around her as the evening chill set in. Thank you for showing up today, she said softly, leaning against the wooden railing. Ethan glanced at her, his expression unreadable. I know I wasn't always there before. I regret that. Sophia nodded, letting the silence stretch between them. I can't undo what happened, Soph, Ethan added quietly. But I can try to be better now. She met his gaze, the weight of years of hurt softening, not disappearing, but no longer as sharp. I know, she said finally, and I hope you keep trying. Ethan's eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite place, gratitude. Maybe. Or relief. "I will," he promised. As he walked to his car, Sophia lingered on the porch, watching until his taillights disappeared down the street. She didn't know if their family would ever fully heal, but for the first time in a long while, hope didn't feel so distant. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days stretched into weeks, and Ethan's visits became part of their routine. Each Saturday, he arrived without fail, carrying small gifts or stories to share with Lily and Jack. At first, Sophia watched cautiously, waiting for him to slip back into old habits. But as the weeks passed, Ethan's consistency began to feel less like a performance and more like genuine effort. One Saturday afternoon, as Ethan and Jack kicked a soccer ball in the backyard, Sophia found herself sitting beside Lily on the porch steps. Lily's sketchbook rested on her lap, half filled with drawings of trees, flowers, and faint outlines of their family. She shaded softly, glancing up every so often to capture something new. "He's different," Lily said quietly, her pencil pausing against the paper. Sophia looked out at Ethan, who laughed as Jack chased the ball down the hill. "Yeah, he is." Lily hesitated before speaking again. "Do you think he'll stay like this?" Sophia exhaled slowly, searching for the right words. "I think he's trying his best, sweetie, and that's all we can ask for right now." Lily nodded thoughtfully, shading a little more of the drawing. "I like when he's here. Jack does too." Sophia smiled faintly. "I know." As the sun began to set, Ethan called Jack over, ruffling his hair as they packed up the soccer ball. Lily closed her sketchbook, tucking it under her arm as they stood to meet him by the front door. Ethan crouched down, pulling Jack into a hug. "I'll see you next week, buddy." Jack grinned. "Can we play soccer again?" Ethan chuckled. "Of course." Lily stepped forward, wrapping her arms around her dad briefly. It wasn't much, but Sophia could see the warmth in her daughter's eyes as she pulled away. Ethan straightened, meeting Sophia's gaze over their heads. "Thanks for letting me keep coming around," he said softly, careful not to overstep. Sophia nodded, leaning against the doorframe. "You're their dad, Ethan. They deserve to have you here." His eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, the weight of their shared history seemed lighter. As Ethan walked to his car, Lily and Jack waved from the porch, their laughter echoing into the cool evening air. Sophia wrapped an arm around both of them, pulling them close. And as they stood together, watching Ethan drive away, she felt something settle deep within her. Not closure, but acceptance. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still theirs to shape. And maybe, just maybe, they were finally on the right path. The following Saturday came with the soft drizzle of rain, tapping gently against the windows. The gray sky cast a calm stillness over the house, and Sophia found herself enjoying the quiet. Jack sat on the living room floor, building a tower of blocks, while Lily sketched by the window, tracing the outlines of raindrops as they streamed down the glass. Ethan's car pulled into the driveway right on time. Even after months of consistency, Sophia still felt a flicker of apprehension whenever he arrived, as if part of her was bracing for the day he wouldn't show. But he did, every time. Jack ran to the door before Ethan had even knocked, flinging it open with a grin. "Dad, you're here." Ethan stepped inside, shaking the rain from his jacket. "Wouldn't miss it, buddy." Lily greeted him with a quiet smile, but she no longer hesitated to step forward for a hug. Sophia lingered in the kitchen, giving them space to reconnect before joining them. As the afternoon unfolded, they played board games at the kitchen table while rain drummed softly outside. Jack's laughter filled the room, and even Lily seemed more at ease, leaning into Ethan's side as they counted pieces. Sophia watched the three of them, sipping her tea in silence. She had once imagined moments like this during their marriage. Small, peaceful days where nothing felt complicated. It wasn't the picture-perfect family she had once envisioned, but it was real, and maybe that was better. Later, as Ethan prepared to leave, he lingered by the door, waiting for Jack and Lily to disappear upstairs. Sophia crossed her arms, leaning against the wall. "You're doing well with them," she admitted, tilting her head slightly. Ethan smiled, his eyes softening. "They make it easy." Sophia hesitated before continuing. I didn't think you'd stick with it. Ethan's smile faded slightly, but there was no anger in his eyes, just quiet understanding. I didn't either, he admitted. But I didn't realize how much I'd been missing until I almost lost it. Sophia held his gaze for a long moment. There was honesty there, something she hadn't seen in him for years. I'm glad you didn't, she said softly. Ethan nodded, shifting his jacket over his arm. I know I can't fix everything, Sophia, but I'm not going anywhere this time. Sophia smiled faintly, the weight of his words settling gently over her. I hope you mean that, she replied, because they're finally starting to trust you again. Ethan's gaze drifted toward the staircase, where Jack's laughter echoed faintly from his room. I won't let them down. As he opened the door and stepped into the rain, Sophia stood by the entrance, watching as he walked to his car. The sky had darkened, but the rain felt lighter now, almost refreshing. Lily appeared at the top of the stairs, watching from behind the railing. Mom, Sophia turned, offering her daughter a soft smile. Yeah, sweetie. Lily's eyes flicked toward the window, where Ethan's car disappeared down the street. Do you think he'll come back next week? Sophia crossed the room and pulled Lily into a gentle hug, brushing a hand over her hair. I think he will. Lily rested her head against Sophia's shoulder, nodding quietly. I hope so. As Sophia held her daughter close, she realized something had shifted, not just with Ethan, but within herself. The anger, the resentment, even the lingering hurt, it was beginning to fade. Healing didn't happen all at once. It was slow, gradual, built from moments like this, quiet, simple, and real. And as the rain softened outside, Sophia felt something else bloom in its place. Hope. Hello guys, if you like our stories and haven't subscribed yet, support our work and subscribe to the channel to help us.